Dear colleagues, President, it's my great pleasure to talk with you about the suprascapular entrapment and how we can help the surgeon to deal with this sometimes complicated disease. So let's first start with a quick review of the innervation of the muscle of the shoulder. So the suprascapular nerve SSN innervates the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus muscle, while the axillary nerve innervates the deltoid, part of the rotator cuff, and the teres minor. And the least, the suprascapular nerve innervates solely the subscapularis muscle. So, the first message, and if you have a suprascapular nerve involvement or entrapment, you have a sparing of teres minor and deltoid. And as we can see later, it's very important for the differential diagnosis. While it runs along the scapula, the suprascapularis nerve can be entrapped at two sides. The first one being the suprascapular notch, and the second one is the sphenoglenoid notch. There was two sides when we have to give a special look. So let's start with the first one, the suprascapular notch. At this level, the suprascapular nerve runs within a fiber osseous tunnel. And this tunnel is formed by the notch itself, and as you can see here, the notch by itself could be quite aggressive for the nerve if it's narrow. The roof of the tunnel is formed by a thick ligament, the suprascapular ligament, as you can see here. And at this level, the nerve is semi-fixed. And therefore, it can be chronically stretched and injured in repetitive in overhead arm motions, like in volleyball, very frequent volleyball players, and in tennis players. Just to remind you that if the nerve entrapment occurs at the level of the suprascapular notch, you will see an involvement of both supraspinatus and infraspinatus muscle. While, if the entrapment occurs at the sphenoglenoid notch, we will only see a purely infraspinatus involvement. This is important to guide the surgeon. Here you have an example of an acute innervation following a suprascapular notch impingement in a young athlete volleyball player. So you will see signs of denervation as muscle edema on fluid sensitive sequence involving their supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, and as I told you before, you have a sparing of teres minor and of the deltoid. It's quite important. Another example, you have denervation, we have edema within the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus muscle. As I said before, you have a sparing with respect to deltoid and teres minor. So it's a specific suprascapular nerve injury. In some cases, the suprascapular ligament can be so thick and even could ossify that the surgeon had to remove it to release this ligament in order to ease and free the nerve. A very rare differential diagnosis is a suprascapular notch tumor, quite rare, only one example, but you have the same way denervation of supraspinatus and infraspinatus. It's rare. Let's move now to the second site. The second site is the sphenoglenoid notch. At this location, you have a very specific cause, very frequent cause that are parallel cysts, and I will show you later. But just to remind you that if you have an involvement of the nerve at this level, you have an exclusive, a solid involvement of the infraspinatus muscle. It's important to look at. So, if you have an isolated infraspinatus involvement, have a very acute look at the sphenoglenoid notch and the glenoid fossa. And as I told you before, one of the very frequent, probably the main causes of entrapment at this level are parallel cysts. Here I have an example of a tennis player that has signs of acute infraspinatus innervation. You see the edema, and you see that the edema occurs only at the level of infraspinatus. And we were related those denervation to the occurrence of the cyst, as you can see here, a posterior parallel cyst. So, message number 3, if you have an isolated infraspinatus involvement, look for cysts. It's sometimes not visible because here it's bright, it could be gray, it could be dark, so you have to look specifically for it. And sometimes the fluid within the cyst can be so thick, as you can see on these arthroscopic pictures, that you cannot remove them percutaneously, and the surgeon has to evacuate them through arthroscopy. At the chronic stage of denervation, you're going to see atrophy, muscular atrophy appearing. You have an example here on the sagittal T1 weighted sequence of fatty infiltration within the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. And I told you before, a very important sign is the respect of teres minor. It's not a rotator cuff injury, it's denervation. And you can see in this young patient that you have significant, visibly muscular loss of muscular volume, sorry. Okay, now the two main differential diagnoses that you have to think about are the first one, plexus injury, the so-called Parsonage syndrome. You see here a young patient that has a brachial plexus injury of a motor vehicle accident. You have an eye signal within the brachial plexus, and you can see you have a diffuse involvement, diffuse eye signal of the whole muscle of the shoulder, including the deltoid. So, message number 4. If you have a diffuse involvement, including the deltoid, you have to check for a plexus injury. It's not local denervation, it's more general than that. And the last differential diagnosis, and could be sometimes tricky, are acute strain. You have here an example of a young professional player that fell on the shoulder but was complaining of pain for several weeks, and you can see on those images that you have, of course, muscular edema, and muscular edema occurring at the level of the supraspinatus and the infraspinatus. But a very important thing to identify is that RIMA is centered around the intramuscular tendon. That's not denervation, that's solid trauma. The trauma occurring at the myotendinous junction. So the last message, if you have muscular edema, check for the myotendinous junction and look for trauma. So my 5 take-home messages. The first one, if you have a suprascapular nerve involvement, you have a sparing of teres minor and deltoid. The second one, if you have a diffuse involvement of the muscle of the shoulder, including the deltoid, check for plexus injury. It's not local, it's probably more general. The third and fourth messages are, if you have isolated infraspinatus involvement, check the sphenoglenoid notch and the glenoid fossa, and look specifically for cyst. Sometimes it's quite difficult to see. And the last message, if you have muscular edema occurring in those two muscles, infraspinatus and supraspinatus, have a close look, check carefully the myotendinous junction, you can have sign of trauma. That being said, I thank you for your attention.